All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Conservation Conversation. Today we have an incredible guest. We are talking about the conservation and preservation of humanity. Normally we focus on the environment or we focus on the animal kingdom. Today we are going to focus on what we are doing to ourselves. And we have a very special guest, Alex Gowen, coming to us live from the Ukraine. So I wanted to go ahead and really, this is such an amazing person to have because Alex has been traveling on the front lines throughout the country, and he has a lot of amazing insight to share with us. I encourage every guest or everybody that's here, comment, ask Alex direct questions, please. So I don't want to waste much time. Without further ado, let's get in the show. All right, and here we are, episode 55. How did we get here? I love this show because we get an opportunity to talk to so many guests around the world and find out what kind of solutions are happening around the world for problems that we all face. And one big problem that everybody has been very conscious of this year, excuse me, is the Russian movement into Ukraine. So we want to start and talk about that right away. What I'd like to do, as we do with every show, is start off with our favorite quote. And today's quote is by Ralph Waldo Emerson. The real and lasting victories are those of peace and not of war. The reason I bring that quote up today is because we're going to be talking about some of the more difficult aspects of what's going on in Ukraine, but also some of the positive stories and some of the uplifting humanitarian stories. So today's a very, very amazing episode. Now, if you're like me, you probably don't know much about the history of Ukraine or Russia. And the only thing that we're getting is coming from the news. And that's why we wanted to do today's show, to show that what's really happening over there. So as a very brief history before we go and meet Alex, I want to just show everybody what happens is the Ukraine, this is the invasion, Russian invasion currently of Ukraine. Now, Ukraine and Russia were both part of the USSR, Soviet Union, back in the day. And when it broke up, the two of them broke up. And Ukraine had a division where part of the Ukraine government wanted to go more towards Western markets, and the other half wanted to be more pro-Russian. That is the conflict we see. And we have to remember that Russia has been doing this to Ukraine since 2014. So although we're just thinking about it right now, it's actually something that has been going on for quite a while. And so there's a lot of emotion and a lot of feeling in all this. And what I want to do today, though, is focus on the people. You know, when this first broke out, I asked Alex, what about the terminal cancer patients? What about the children that are in hospitals? What about people that can't leave the hospitals? And you know, the answer he gave me broke my heart. A lot of them are just gone. You know, a lot of them couldn't be evacuated. So I don't care about the government. I don't care about the military. I don't care about those aspects. What I care about are the people. And that's what Alex cares about as well. And so we're going to focus today on what's happening to the people over there and get a little bit more insight. And I wanted to share this video with you that I just got today. And this is a memorial of some of the victims. Okay, so as you could see there, people are starting to put these memorials up, and I want to bring up the point that these are civilians, and these are children. These are children. No country can excuse this. Nobody can excuse that. So without much further ado, let's bring on Alex and talk to him and see what is happening out in the Ukraine there. Hey, Alex, thanks for joining today.
Hey, Eric. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, man, good to see you. We've been in touch and out of touch for a little while now. Why don't we start off? I'd like for everybody to get a sense of what's happening over there. What does your organization do, and where have you been the last couple weeks?
Okay, well, in brief, the Fisherman is sort of a broad spectrum charity. We carry UN consultative status, but really that doesn't help us much in the grand scope of what we try to do, and that is focus on medical care of children. And as of late, we've just sort of broadened our responsibilities to pretty much anything. Supplying hospitals, caring for the orphan children, which is what we started doing back in '05, and evacuation, landmine, IED, ERW, education, human trafficking protection. I mean, you name it. Suddenly now all of it is our concern.
I wanted to just show this picture here. This is you in front of a tank. How common is it to see these tanks on your day-to-day?
Actually, blown up one. A lot more common than I expected. We went out. That was east of Kiev and northeast of Kiev, and we saw, I don't know, my guess is upwards around 20 tanks, Russian tanks. They're all Russian, and
wow.
Yeah, and so included with that were a number of BMPs, which are like the armored troop carriers, some trucks, but mostly there were tanks.
Now, the one thing about coverage on Ukraine is that it has been so generalized, and we hear these broad, sweeping, generalized comments like Ukraine is fighting back or Russia is doing this or that. But I want to make this more personal, and I'd like for you to tell us about this photo.
Oh, yeah. That's Oksana. That's a friend of mine from Lysychansk. There are two areas where I worked the most, and both of which are in the eastern part of Ukraine, and that's Kharkiv, which is the big city in East Ukraine, and Lysychansk. And she is a nurse from Lysychansk. And one day on the way back home, she and her husband were walking, and she stepped on a landmine. He had stopped to do something, and she was about 10 yards ahead of her, of him, and she stepped on a landmine, and she doesn't really remember anything, during the explosion. All she remembers is realizing that something had happened, and she saw her legs, a number of meters away. But none of us really expected a positive outcome from, her injuries. But we visited her today, and she's doing great, better than great, really. She has a tremendously positive outlook. International news agencies are following up on her story, and she's going to Denmark. Yeah, she's fantastic. She just got married, actually, to her husband. This was like, I think, a week ago.
Oh, wow.
They're going to fit her with the prosthetic legs that I think integrate with the brain so that they work, like normal legs. I'm curious to see how that looks. That's
fantastic.
Fantastic, yeah.
Wow. Well, she's a hero for the work that she does day to day, and the way that she's handling all this, and bringing attention to survivors and people that are continuing through this difficulty. Like the quote that we had, these are the stories that last, are the stories of love and the stories of positivity that come out of this hellish environment. And we've got a couple Facebook users with us, and we have Valeria says, great, we need more dead Russian tanks. And I can see where I know Valeria works with a lot of the charities over there, and does a lot, for the people over there. Now, I want to know from you, what's it been like? And I want to play a couple of videos and photos and have us talk about them a little bit. But you already work over there. You've been there for several years. I know that you work with a lot of children's hospitals, with a lot of different charities. You bring equipment over to Ukraine. You help people that can't always get the care that they need. And sometimes you arrange to be able to bring people back to the United States to get the kind of care that they need. That means that you worked with a lot of hospitals and a lot of doctors and a lot of patients. What has your experience been? Are those people still around? Are those hospitals around? And how does it make you feel?
It's heartbreaking, honestly, but at the same time, weirdly inspirational. And what I mean by that is, yeah, okay, I put 8 years. I've been here since 2014. Well, not consistently, but back and forth. And so that's 8 solid years of providing, medical care and services and equipment, especially to the hospitals here. And pretty much all of them were children's hospitals. And then within a period of 2 months, most of them are just gone, so far as I understand it. But the inspirational part is that the doctors and patients are largely okay. Now I have lost some friends, quite a few actually. But they were able to get the children to safety, the patients to safety. They were able to, restore services as best as possible. Even while under gunfire, they were continuing to do their work. It's just magnificent. The bravery and ingenuity and so on that the Ukrainian people have. And that comes from decades and more, centuries really, of being, put into difficult situations. What I really especially love about the Ukrainian people is that no matter how bad things get, they still smile, they still laugh, they still hug, and they're just really beautiful, caring people, and that's great. But the Russians have intentionally targeted hospitals. I know that. One of my dearest friends is the director of an ambulance service that covers the entire eastern region, the northern part of the eastern region. And as his drivers in ambulances clearly marked, the Russians will shoot at those cars specifically. And I've lost friends that way too. So yeah, it's like I said, inspirational and heartbreaking at the same time.
I just can't even imagine, what it's got to be like there on a day-to-day, seeing so much suffering and so many people still trying to stay positive. I know that when you and I were talking, you had already started to mention the building back of Ukraine, which Ukrainians are starting to focus on. So I think that really shows the spirit of the people there, that they're already thinking, okay, we're going to build back, we're going to be twice as strong, and we are here to stay. And that's really beautiful. So I'd like to just show everybody 1 or 2 videos to get a real sense of what things are really like on the ground there, because we're just seeing these cleaned up versions of these atrocities. In America, people are still debating if there's even civilian casualties. People are debating. People over here are debating their gas prices and not what's happening over there. And I think that there's a huge disconnect. And this is something that the entire world cannot allow to continue, which is this targeting. And so let's pop this video on real quick and talk about this.
We're here still in Irpin, which is not far from Bucha. The Russians came in on the 24th of February, and finally the Ukrainians came in and retook the town on the 28th of March. This is what the Russians did. So this was an intentional attack on people's homes. That's all this is, just people's homes. But now it's back in Ukrainian hands.
So once again, one of those difficult things to watch.
Yeah.
So to people that aren't there, that are just theorizing this particular war and what's happening over there, are there, to confirm to everybody that's on the show here, are there civilian casualties and are they being targeted?
Yes, I mean, without question, they're being targeted. Because I'm connected with the medical community here, I hear the stories from doctors and other medical staff, and they aren't prone to fabrication. What you just saw there was Irpin, which is, I think, maybe 10 miles from Bucha. And to put it into perspective, most of you won't understand this reference, but the suburb of Raleigh, it's not really a suburb, it's an independent city, but Cary, Apex, Holly Springs are the affluent areas. There's Raleigh, the center of North Carolina, the capital, and the other ones. So Bucha and Irpin are like the Cary and Apex, or Cary and Holly Springs of North Carolina. And where all the wealthy people live. And they went in there and just demolished those cities. As you know, Bucha has been on the news a lot because of the execution of civilians, and that's just a simple fact. When you have mass graves with people with their arms bound behind their backs, with gunshots in the back of their head, there's only one conclusion. And that is, it was an execution of civilians. And these were civilians. They were not military. Included among them are, children, women, and elderly. And the buildings that you saw, they're all just apartment buildings, flats, they have no military value whatsoever. As of yet, now, of course, I don't go into the military areas, so I haven't seen all of that. But as of yet, I haven't seen a single military target that's been hit. But, I've seen only civilian targets. Interesting. Just after we did that video on Irpin, they found another mass grave there. I think it was that so far they found 240 some odd civilians that were executed by Russians. I'm not a war criminal investigator, so I can't say with 100% certainty, yes, but I do know there are civilians, and I do know they're executed. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for at least, firsthand, you've seen it, you've seen the destruction, and you've seen the outcome. So I appreciate you letting us know, without any kind of spin, there's no advertising or anything here. This is just what, you're seeing. I mean, and I want to remind everybody, you are in Ukraine when the conflict started to ramp up. A lot of people I know were headed out of there, and you flew right in there. So, I think it's important that, the NGOs, I mean, it shows. You're showing people that the world cares. And you, by proxy, are showing that I care and that a lot of us care. And it's important. And we thank you for letting people know that they're not forgotten and that, we want to see everybody be okay. And this is just, it's unacceptable. It's like seeing the 1940s all over. It's so strange, this concept of tanks. And I mean, we have a modern world. We have an online economy. We have a worldwide economy. We're no longer these isolated places. And perhaps Russia is a place where their thinking is still maybe 50, 60 years back. If they think that isolation is something that's going to work, it's like watching an old World War II movie. It's absurd. Same really equipment and everything.
Yeah. I mean, we went out there and we saw, and speaking from an amateur point of view, we looked at the battle damage, the battlefields, and all the trash that was left behind by the Russian military.
Oop. Alex, you're okay.
Oh.
Yeah, there you go. Sorry, we missed you there at the end. Yeah.
Where'd you lose me?
Russian military.
That's pretty far back. Okay, I'll repeat. Yeah. So I basically, I've long said that if you want to know the character of an army, you investigate their trash, what they leave behind. And we went out to the battlefields and saw the tanks and everything. And yeah, that revealed fatal flaws in the equipment itself. But in the trash, what I saw was confusion, bad planning, bad leadership, a military that didn't have a logistical system to support them. Most of the food that you see is not Russian MREs. It's food that they stole from stores that, and I think I sent you some photos. Yeah, there we go. Some photographs of the stores that they looted, and that's because they had no food. But they also looted everything else. I mean, they took toys and desks and chairs, and I mean, you name it. But it's a military that was unprepared for what they were facing, and thank goodness, you know. But yeah, a little bit more about the stories from the doctors and so on. These are doctors whom I've known for years, and I guess I'll keep this PG, right? Oh, boots. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
So many Russian boots. Yeah, apparently they hate their own boots, and these were all over the place. Any chance they had to replace their footwear, they did. Yeah, but
now this was kind of a grisly one coming up. So if anybody's watching and they don't want to see something kind of gross, please look away right now. But this is something we do need to show. What?
The
so,
feet. Yeah.
Did you find body parts out in the field a lot, or?
Yeah. Surprisingly, more than I thought, and also surprisingly in relatively decent condition, given how long some of them had been out there. But that's because it was cold, refrigerated, so to speak, and so. But yeah, there were some that we saw in trees and other places, but the Ukrainians hit them very, very hard. And these people probably never knew what happened to them. I'm certain of it, actually. Yeah. Yeah. An office chair, they definitely stole that.
It's interesting, because we're seeing a lot of their imagery as them being very difficult. Here it appear to be some toys, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe more looting. More, but they looking at these pictures, they seem a little lost. I mean, they can't. I mean, how can they even find ways to justify this within their own country?
The previous photograph. Well, that's one of the same. That car has a very sad story, which is unfortunately very common, and that is the car was stopped on the road heading either towards or away from Kiev. I don't know which, but it was stopped by Russian military. A family of three, mother, father, and a child. And the Russian soldiers told the father to get out of the car. He did. He had his hands up, and they shot him on the spot. And then they shot the wife and child. This is, like I said, it's a documented incident. And if you look closely in that particular photograph, you can see the bullet holes where they continued to spray it with bullets. Yeah, and I think there was another one in Irpin, a black car, that was completely riddled with bullets. I do not know if there were people in that one. I kind of doubt it, but they just sort of went wild shooting at things. So, yeah. But a friend of mine who escaped through Poland with her daughter said that if you are with a child, the Russians will target you. They were actually very afraid of that when trying to get to Poland. Signs in the car saying there are children here. If you recall the story about the theater in Mariupol with the word children written outside the building, clearly visible to aircraft. Yeah, well, same thing. They would put a paper up in the car, in the window saying, hey, there are children in this car. And they're the ones that the Russians shot at. And so these stories are just insanely common, unfortunately, and a very difficult thing. I mean, I heard them secondhand. I didn't even see it, and it traumatizes you to think that these things are happening. So again, these are coming from sources that I know, and I know they don't lie. So I know that these accounts are accurate. So yeah.
Well, let's. I want to show everybody one or two more pieces of video, just so they can see firsthand what's going on out there, because it's so easy for people to sit back that aren't there and sort of minimize the suffering and I want to show people what kind of this day-to-day looks
Right
like.
here, there was an incident involving the Russian military using 2 children as human shields. They walked the children in front of their tanks to keep the Ukrainians from attacking the tanks. That happened right here. We're here in Dmitrivka.
Oop. Oh, got a blooper. That's good though. At least we can see there's some. I don't know how how you guys managed
Here
to.
at a park in Dnipro, and in front of me is the Dnipro River, which is the main river that goes through Ukraine. And this is what life is like. We're here in a hot war zone. There are sirens every day with warnings of missile attacks. But this is what the people do. Ukrainians are strong, and they're, well, let's face it, they're used to this. So whenever they have a chance to get out in the nice weather, this is what they do.
So I find that piece of video really extraordinary because I can hear children like laughing and playing in the background. How do people maintain their lives in the midst of all of this?
Again, that's one of the beauties of the Ukrainian character, you know. This is in Dnipro, and there were sirens constantly all day long, you know, missile alerts, and because the Russians are continuing to lob missiles into Dnipro and other major railway junctions, and they just, you know, like, okay, you know, it's life. You know, things happen, and they go about, you know, doing whatever they can to bring about joy and happiness during dark times. Ukrainians are really good at that. You know, they focus on the positive side of things, and they're really constructive and just brilliant at this sort of thing. You know, I wish we were better at that. You know, I mean,
Sure.
They know how to focus on things that actually matter, and that's great. But yeah, no, that was like I think maybe an hour after a missile alarm. So yeah, and that's the way it is. There's you can go anywhere in any city, and in between the sirens, people are out doing shopping, people are out going to parks. You know, so yeah.
As this person says, resilience. You know, so key. Sierra says your work is incredible. Alex, what's your biggest need right now, and how can people help out?
Oh, wow. Okay. You know, the unfortunate thing is, to answer that question, is something that I've never liked in the entirety of my, you know, humanitarian work. And that is, oh, well, we need everything. I've heard that so many times. But,
Sure.
but in truth, if I were to boil it down to a couple of bare necessities, it would be body armor for people like the ambulance drivers, you know, the ones who are going out into combat areas and facing Russians who just want to shoot at them while they're doing their calls. And so body armor, helmets, the tactical goggles so they can see what they're doing with mortars blowing up around them. It's actually quite important. A few weeks ago, I would have said food. But it seems to be that they've got that under control. Another thing that I can say is quite necessary at this point are the completely equipped medic bags. You know, you can buy them online, but the tactical medic bags that come with everything that's needed. That's another thing. So really heavily focused on personal protection and medical items. That's what I see immediate and absolute need for. Yeah.
Okay, good to know. And you know, anybody that wants to be able to donate these items, you can reach Alex through either the website, which will have the link, or through the Facebook page, and he'll be able to get you the best place to be able to send them, either to his organization or potentially out to people in the field that he might not be able to reach. So, and let's see, Drusilla is with us, and Drusilla says, thank you, Eric, to have Alex on here, learning a lot, sending heartfelt prayers and energy for continuing assistance throughout his group to assist the Ukrainians. God bless you in every effort. How can we help? And Drusilla, Alex was just saying, that they do need those donations to try to keep people safe, like ambulance drivers. I'm guessing probably even civilians that are just
Yeah.
have to go from place to place during times of extreme, shelling and an invasion. Facebook user, I don't know who this person is. It says, "Hail to historic, bold, brave, brilliant Russian women." I don't know who that is. Polyak. Oh gosh, I'm going to mispronounce these names terribly. So I'll just put it up there and you guys can read. And I'm not quite sure what that is. But I mean, Alex, it must be complicated because when these two countries were part of one nation, there must be a lot of people on both sides. Is the sentiment from Ukrainians, is it, like we instantly feel this anger towards Russians. And is that how it is there, or are people more understanding at the government, not so much the people?
It was that way. I mean, even with the war in 2014, and remember that I've watched this grow. It went from being one state to another state to another state. So from the beginning, yes, there were some very bad feelings with the Russians and pro-Russians because of the annexation of Crimea and the occupation of Donbass. But there was still that there were a lot of Ukrainians in Russia, a lot of Russians in Ukraine, families on both sides, and so on. But after this invasion, it all changed, and that was one of the heartbreaking things to see, because the Ukrainian people whom I know, and there are quite a few that I know, they're all extremely loving, kind, caring, understanding people. They really are. More so than I've witnessed in any other country, to be honest with you. And now, the sentiment is just incredibly dark and angry and hateful towards the Russians for extremely understandable reasons. It's heartbreaking because, I'm seeing them go from being so happy to being so angry. But how can you not be when you witness, these rapes and these murders and these genocidal acts and targeting of civilians? It's impossible to maintain that sense of brotherhood and togetherness that did exist, So, yeah, I get it. I do.
This picture I wanted to put up is Wolverines. A little nod to Red Dawn. Now, this picture I wanted to share because I know some people that were involved in trying to get these animals out of the zoo. Although I will say, just on my perspective, that this is a wonderful reminder to everybody that zoos cannot guarantee to protect their animals, and do we really need them? That's just my anti-zoo thing. I had to throw it in there. Sorry, it has no place in this discussion because we're talking about other important things. Now, there is a comment here I wanted to ask Heather. Let's see. Hold on. We're getting a lot of comments, so I don't want to get too behind.
Okay.
I want to keep up with everybody. And anybody has questions for Alex, please ask in the comments so we can bring them in. Heather says, but you're there to help with medical needs, not blog and investigate. Aren't the donations for medical assistance and food? And real fast, let me just answer the first part of it. I have been asking Alex to shoot videos and pictures. Alex kind of is not that guy. He doesn't really want to do that. And it has been at my request, because we want to get this thing really well documented, that he does do those videos. So it is kind of a new thing. So if there is any, question about that, I have been asking Alex to do these blogs and to show us what's happening firsthand. But the question I think that Heather brings up is a very good one. The donations are for medical assistance and food. How can people know that their donations are going to the right organization? And what have you seen over there as far as donations and it actually getting to the people? And what can you tell us or advise us on how to know that our money is going to go help?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, generally speaking, I discourage people from sending money. It's more so send the material. That's usually a good move in general. So far as supplies are concerned, now my information is a little bit dated on this, so bear with me. But in the first few weeks, we liaised with the WHO, and we were discussing with them problems with that, that question. And we did a little bit of investigating and discovered that roughly half of the material that's sent are at that time. It's not the case now. It's improved quite a bit. But at that time, about half of the material that was being sent into Ukraine was not getting where it needs to go. It would wind up in Lviv, which is where I am now, which is a center for, distribution. And a lot of it would stay in the West, which is not where it's needed. It's needed in the East, extremely much so, especially Kharkiv and Lysychansk, Rivizhnya. So that's why we were so hell-bent on setting up logistical supply routes with people who we know and we trust to make sure they actually get there. So we now have two, one through Poland, another one through Romania. And so the key to that is to know who you're dealing with. If you're sending a donation in, make sure it's done in such a way that you can kind of keep an eye on it, track it, make phone calls, send emails, make sure that it's going where it's supposed to go. Now, part of the problem with that is you are dealing with a war zone, and sometimes things are going to get stolen. Sometimes they're going to get destroyed. So it's never 100%. And anybody who says 100%, don't trust them.
There you go.
But
that's good to know.
It's good to know who you're dealing with. That's my answer. And go back a couple of photographs to the animals. I do know that that in Echo Park, which is in Kharkiv, people really tried desperately to get those animals out, but the Russians kept shooting at. That's the one in Kiev.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, there are some animals there, but apparently people are taking, because Kiev is not very much under attack now, but Kharkiv is. And there were animals who were dying from starvation because whenever people would go to take care of those animals, they were getting shot. So there are situations like that are just heartbreaking. But then there are organizations like Kharkiv Animal Rescue on Instagram, and they go out when they're being shot at and bombed, and they go and rescue animals that were left behind. And it's heartbreaking, but inspirational, And if people want to donate money and medical supplies for animals, that's who you should go with, Kharkiv Animal Rescue. So remember that.
Good. Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you. Because a lot of people have been asking me, I've been getting a bunch of messages during this podcast asking where they can help the animals.
Yeah.
So that's good to know. And that's what we need. We need that kind of, because there's so many groups trying to fundraise off of it and this and that. Yeah. And, the number one thing is, I think everybody just really wants to help. It's been, there's this theory, right? And it's the basis of capitalism, actually, that man is greedy. I come from a philosophy, I don't believe that. And the reason I say that is because any natural disaster, you will see ordinary people become heroes. And when the chips are down, people don't think, they just help each other. And we act out of love naturally, I think. And we're seeing that with Ukraine right now. We're seeing the entire world pouring out, showing love. I was amazed when I read a story. I don't know if you guys read this, where Airbnb, what they were doing is to get money in. People were renting it and then just not going. And then the people that had the Airbnbs were getting the money donations in. The money was coming in and they were getting it back to their communities. So, the internet is clever. And like I said, it's nice because, we see this aggression coming in the form of an antiquated concept of tanks and guns and bullets. And those things are so antiquated and we've moved so far past that. But we have the internet and we have the hearts of the entire world stepping in and doing what they can. It's very, again, as I think you've said it, it's extremely tragic and inspirational. A Facebook user, I'm not quite sure who sent this, but I wanted to share this story. They shot a young family of a friend of mine in Ukraine. Their children had played with each other for 3 months ago, now that father, mother, 3-year-old son are gone. And my friend and his wife and 3 boys made it to Warsaw, Poland, and now they are in France. His parents are still at the homestead in Ukraine. It makes no sense and is exceedingly wicked. Putin will be held accountable. Putin is going down. That's a very tragic story to hear. You know, I just can't even imagine. I mean, I imagine everybody in the country has been touched in one way or another by this tragedy. Ukrainians will need PTSD counseling for sure. Heather says, outreach to tactical companies would be a good thing. Heather, great idea. It sounds like, you know, I know like DJI drone and everything has been having issues where they're not selling any more drones in that region because of how they're being used. So this could be a really nice potential for a company that usually makes instruments of death to perhaps make instruments of liberation. Javelins have detachable sights with infrared and night vision. Sounds like somebody knows what they're talking about. I don't even know what a javelin is. But, Heather says, where do we send donations? Which we had talked about. And Heather, thank you for being so involved in this. I know I've been talking to her on and off, you know, we work on a few different projects together, and she's been really focused on trying to do what we can from the States.
Awesome.
Somebody says, thanks for sharing the story with us, Alex. Have all the zoos had their animals transported to safe refuges? At the moment, it's probably, what would you say?
I would say no. Apparently, there's still animals at the zoo in Kiev. I do not know their state, but I know that, you know, Kiev is pretty safe at this point. In Kharkiv, I think they're okay, but I cannot say that with absolute certainty. I know that a lot of them did die or were shot, you know, died of starvation or were shot. Heart attack, that was another thing that a lot of animals died from, apparently. So, yeah.
Imagine, I mean, the noise alone.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we see it just with, you know, cats and dogs during New Year's Eve over here. I mean, I can't even imagine, you know, Heather says they have 80 caretakers. Most of the animals are still there due to difficulties in evacuating. And I think, you know, Heather brings up a great point. We're not able to evacuate them. We should stop, in my estimation, unless we can, you know, guarantee custody of care, which is very important when you're liberating animals or saving animals. Unless zoos can start to guarantee that and have a plan of action, we don't know if there's really a reason for them to exist in modern days. But it's a difficult time because what are we going to do? You know, now's not the time to protest the zoo. Now's the time to save the animals. So, you know, we have to take our lessons as they come, you know, bit by bit throughout this. Now, I wanted to ask you, Alex, I've got a couple more photos here I'm real curious about. And if you could let us know what's going on here.
Okay, actually...
you're in the land of giants.
You know what? Yeah, I'm tired of being the shortest person in every photograph. That's just not fair. Okay, to my right is Debbie. She's my assistant director here in Ukraine. Wow, she's been great for doing everything, you know, that had to be done during the war inside Ukraine. Couldn't have done this without her.
Thank you, Debbie.
Next to her is the purpose of the photograph. He is a theater master. I'm not really sure what title to give him, but he was reciting poetry and just, I had no idea what he was saying. Not a clue. It was in Ukrainian. It's like, okay, but it was the way he said it that just made it magical. It's actually on my Facebook page, a number of posts down, but the full speech is in there, and it's worth listening to. It's just brilliant. Yeah. And apologies, I can't remember his name. Yeah.
Maybe somebody that's watching can add it in the comment section for us so we can check him out.
That would be, yeah.
Yeah, because, you know, artists, you know, it's interesting. It goes back to that quote that we had at the beginning of the show. What lasts is acts of love and acts of peace. And, you know, artists are often forgotten during war. And, you know, when we tell the stories of countries, we always, right, like we tell the histories as if battles were the only histories of it. But the lasting knowledge we have comes from poets, writers, musicians, people that are observers and people that are in that culture. You know, we can learn more from what a vase looked like in the ancient Greek times than we can talking about the Peloponnesian Wars. So, you know,
yeah. Yeah.
well,
By the way, just so that your audience know, you know, he came straight from planting potatoes to visiting
really?
us. And, yeah, so yeah, life gone. If there was a dead soldier there, you know, it's like, okay, just plant around him, and yeah, it's yeah, it's just the way. Yeah.
Oh, see, and that's again, that's amazing to see this this resilience. You know,
Yeah.
that's there. Now, this is something that most of us that are over here that have opinions about what's happening over there don't see in our day-to-day life. And
Yeah.
what's the story behind this photo?
That's in Irpin again. That's the car I was telling you about that's just absolutely riddled with bullets. Fairly convinced nobody was in it. They just used it for target practice, but come on, really, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, they did that to so many cars and people, unfortunately. There was a story not far from this location where the Russians had lined up on one side of the road, and any cars that passed by, they shot them like that, you know, just riddled them with bullets. I think they killed 10 cars worth of civilians and dumped them in a ditch not far from the photograph of the car that you showed earlier.
I
The one
see.
that was, yeah, that's where that happened. And so, yeah, there was a lot of that. Yeah.
What is this?
Okay, it's a bit of a comedic incident. That's in Bucha, by the way. And what that is from, that's like from a 30mm cannon that was fired through the tree, not on purpose. If it's on purpose, great shot. But they were shooting at, you know, all Soviet and post-Soviet cities, former Soviet Union, they have tanks in every one of their cities, you know, to commemorate the victory of the Great Patriotic War and so on. And there was one right there, you know, on my side of the tree. And they looked back and they saw this thing and they fired that shot at it. And it was just a monument. And they thought that was hilarious. Yeah.
Never seen anything like that.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting. I'm surprised that tree's still standing, actually. Yeah, Ukrainian tree.
Yeah, exactly. It's resilient. Let's see.
Oh,
okay, and we saw this building.
They shot at. Yeah. That's in
Which
Italy. Yeah. I apologize. I'm looking at a tiny phone image here. So yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I know the. Now this is another Russian tank that's been destroyed.
Yeah.
Which, you know.
Yeah.
So somebody's got to also give them a bill for pollution. I love this moment, by the way, from your video. This, I think, says it all about resilience.
Yeah. Yeah. They fought.
Let's take a look here.
Yeah, this is all Irpin, actually.
These are just regular homes, right?
Yeah, this is just people's places. That's a store, of course, but yeah, a very common sight throughout Ukraine, unfortunately.
What are the hours like over there? When are you allowed to be outside, and are there curfews, or what's the day to day?
Yeah, actually, it varies by city. Here, I think it's from 11 until 6. I think all of them, they end at 6. But when they start, depends on where you are. I think in Dnipro, it's like 9 or 10 at night until 6. In Kiev, it was 10, I think. Yeah, so it varies, but there is a curfew.
Gotcha. And that's okay. Let's see. All right, there we go. Bring you back on. Let's see. Their violence knows no difference on people, animals, wildlife, or nature.
Yeah.
And that's true. That is the unfortunate, and again, I think it's very antiquated concept of war.
Yeah.
Let's see. Heather says, oh, by the way, just so everybody knows, it's $500 a day to feed the animals and keepers in Kiev. Again, another aspect. You know, people are talking about a lot of these victims, but we do forget about the ones that can't leave, and those not only, of course, are animals in zoos, but you know, what you and I had talked about before, which are the people that are in hospitals that can't leave, that can't be evacuated. You know, being somebody, you know, where cancer is like a big part of my life, you know, my first thought was, yeah, I mean, side effects of these things. But, you know, you've got people that are not getting their chemo now. You've got people that don't have access to their radiation. They don't have access to their cures. They don't have access to their medicine. They are, you know, if not being killed immediately, they're being killed slowly by a very cruel fashion. And, you know, that brings up another thing I wanted to talk about, which is what Kate talked about in the video, which is forced starvation. Now, that's a term a lot of people haven't heard of. Can you kind of help us understand that?
Yeah, it was an unfortunate thing that happened. Lysychansk was one, which was one of, you know, my homes. Severodonetsk, Mariupol. It's where, and Kharkiv as well. It's where the one story that really stands out to me was when they would go into people's houses. Now, this needs to be fact checked, but I heard it so many times from so many different refugees and IDPs that it's like, okay, there's got to be a lot of truth in this. But the Russians would go into people's houses, take their food, and then they'll just sort of sit around and wait for them to finally get hungry enough to venture out of their homes, and then they would shoot them. This was a very common story. And then the people in the shelters, quite often, that's what they do. They would shut them in. And then I think in Mariupol, there was one bomb shelter where they were in there for, I think, 3 weeks without food. You know, and it would have been the easiest thing to, you know, give them something, anything, but no, they just let them starve. And one of the primary objectives when we came in the first time was to get food to a bomb shelter in Kharkiv, where the same thing was basically happening, but we couldn't get it there in time. We did manage to get food into Lysychansk, but the problem there was that a lot of food was being stolen, and so we had to develop very secretive ways to get the food in there, and that was a challenge. Demi was very instrumental in helping with that. So yes, forced starvation is absolutely a thing, and it's just insane. That's a tactic. We're talking about civilians, women and children and elderly people. All the men are out there fighting the war. You know, who does that? Who does that? Seriously. And yeah, so that's those are harsh stories, the ones that I heard from the bomb. I can go on about those stories, and I know that they're accurate. You know, so yeah, let me know if you want to hear those, because I could go into that.
Yeah, you know, it's if anything, I would love to have you, excuse me, back on to talk more, especially as things develop.
Yeah.
Since what we're getting over here is just, you know, polarized news that cherry picks for whatever their perspective is. And I think it's important that people hear from somebody who's on the ground what's happening, and to help us see what's happening, because that's the most important thing. Your pictures, the videos that you're doing. And aside from keeping us informed, I know that you've been working with refugees as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that work?
We have been working with refugees, but it's been a little sidelined because we've come into Ukraine itself, you know, and that's where it changes from refugees to IDPs. but
And
the refugees, yeah, that it gets sad actually,
mm,
because we spent time with the refugees. That's where we heard the vast majority of the stories that I'm relaying. And these are doctors and lawyers and
mhm,
high profession people, teachers, and a lot of people that I know, good, beautiful, happy, loving, caring people who all of a sudden, and when I mean all of a sudden, I mean within a week, their entire lives were just gone.
mm,
They're on the run from a military that they knew would kill them if they didn't leave. And either that or send them into Russia, and who knows what would happen to them there. Um, and they made it their way to Poland or Romania or
mm,
wherever. And there are the girls who were traveling alone because they lost their family or lost their husband or whatever, and they would just vanish. There were those stories too, and so we tried to help as best we could, but realized that we really needed to go further into Ukraine, and the refugees. Yes, that's something that we needed to address, but it was more a matter at that point to help people get out. You know,
mm,
once they were actually refugees, officially refugees, meaning they're outside of their country, they were being cared for by the Polish, the Hungarians, the Slovakians, the Romanians, the Moldovans. They were getting care. They are getting care very, very well by those people. But the people inside Ukraine, they really need help. Um, and that really hasn't changed much, by the way.
mm,
We're talking right now about going in, well, I guess staying in my case, but helping get uh, mothers and their children outside of the East, just in case if Russia does a lot more horrendous
mm.
things, which is always possible. So we might be doing evac operations from the East. Um, so that's what I can say about that. Yeah, by the way, a caveat here. I'm sorry I'm being a little bit dreamy, but I've been tremendously, spectacularly sick for like 2 days.
Oh wow! On top of everything, huh?
Yeah, it's gonna happen. But I will say this: you mentioned news, and I will say, as long as you stay away from the topic of what the military is doing,
Mm,
um, and so on, the reports are actually very accurate. What they're saying
good to
about
know.
what's happening in Mariupol, what's happening in Kharkiv and Lviv and so on. It's accurate. The
Good to know.
war crimes, it's accurate. And so we did enough time investigating to make sure that, okay, no, this is true.
Mm,
We felt it to be our duty to, properly inform the American public of, okay, no, this is accurate. The news agencies are doing their job. It's happening here. And so
good.
so yeah, I can say that about the news.
Well, that's definitely good to know. Yeah, because I mean, it's a major topic, and all of us have been following it since day one. And I know that everybody has, a vested interest, whether it's, you know, um, like you and I have people that we're very close to in not only Ukraine but all the countries surrounding it, like Bulgaria,
Yeah.
Romania, Moldova, all the areas. So we want everybody to be safe, and I know that everybody around the world wants this terrible tragedy to end. So
Yeah.
before we head off, I just wanted to ask, what is there anything that we kind of didn't go over that you feel is like maybe a misunderstanding that people have about what's happening over there? Anything you want to say about what's happening over there?
Um, yeah, actually, there is one critical issue. It was more critical earlier on, but it's still happening now. You were talking about the heartedness of the world, and that we're all
Mm,
standing up for what's wrong, standing against what's wrong, and doing what we can to help the people of Ukraine, which is absolutely fantastic, wonderful, and necessary. Um, but what a lot of people wind up doing, people are great. They donate from the bottom of their heart, and they'll send it items, supplies and whatnot over here. And that'll be the end of it. It's like, okay, I've done my good deed, and now I can, move on to other things. The problem is that when you dump a lot of humanitarian aid into a crisis, and this is not the first crisis I've involved in. I was involved in the Kyrgyz Tajik incident in 2010 in Congo, and so others. It's always the same situation. People donate from the bottom of their heart, but they don't do their research in, okay, is my donation going where it's supposed to go? Now, I know you brought that up earlier. It is an important thing to do your research and make sure that what you're donating is actually being used and not dumped in a pile or winding up in somebody's garage. There's a lot of that still happening, so just be careful. Make sure you use somebody who you can trust. That's important.
All right, great. Well, that's great advice. Thank you so much, Alex, and thank you for being there, and thank you for working with all these different hospitals and doctors and getting supplies over there the best you can. Everybody will put some links on here, so you can just click and get in touch with Alex's organization to see where donations can go, or where physical donations can go, and Alex can help point out, or if you have a question about the legitimacy of a particular NGO that's working over there, they may know a little bit more being out on the field, out there. Once you're in the mix of it, it's a different world than for those of us sitting, in the comfort of home, having a little coffee and kicking back. So really, it's important that you're in the field, and I want to thank you for being there, and thank you for the humanity, and thanks for joining us today.
All right. Thank you for having me.
All right. Take care, Alex. Talk to you soon. Okay. Well, there we go. That was Alex, first-hand account of what's happening in Ukraine. You can check out his channels. He's putting up videos of his day-to-day out there and what they're seeing as they're traveling from town to town. So, I know that we had to wait until he was a little bit out of the war zone and a little bit more where they had some stable internet to do the show. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. A lot of amazing conversations, a lot of amazing ideas, a lot of great input. It's a very confusing, difficult time. All of us want to help. Everybody wants to act from the heart, and we have to know how to best do that. So just everybody take care of yourselves, take care of your neighbors, take care of your family, take care of your friends. Take heed that we're not there. We're not in that situation. Not that we couldn't be one day, but none of us really know unless we're there what's happening. And we just have to keep that in mind and keep an open mind to how we can help the best we can help. So it has been, I think, as Alex said perfectly, it's been a terrible tragedy, along with a lot of resilience and beauty. And as we've seen things get worse and worse, we've seen some people act better and better. So we need to find those stories of triumph over tragedy in the midst of a living hell. So it was a very special episode today. We as a species are not very good at taking care of our earth, our environment, or each other. And it's something that, maybe in our next step in our evolution, we can get better at, but we really need to, focus on taking care of each other. It's really important. It's something that I know that we all do as eco-conscious people. And it's been beautiful to see the rest of the world step in. For the people that have just been complaining to me about their gas prices the last few months, sorry, I don't really care. I'm not that worried about what you're going through with that. There's a lot more things to be considering and to be thankful for and to be contemplating. So as we always say on the show, and as we always try to do, we want to move forward unified with love, through the filter of love. Violence begets violence, love begets love, and every action has an equal reaction. So if you put some good energy out, maybe it'll boomerang back. So all of us can help change how this is going. I know we are all in solidarity. Forget about the war, but where we're talking about, we don't want any more people to be killed. It's in this day and age, it's unacceptable and it's antiquated. And as this person says, it is pure evil, and we don't need to do it. Humans are the only ones that commit homicide out of the entire animal kingdom. So we are far below many other animals that we don't think are as bright as we are. And as they say, unify. So sending good energy to everybody. Please keep those thoughts of positivity and love in your hearts. Take care of everybody. And thank you for joining today. Thank you for being part of this really important conversation. We're going to bring Alex back as things continue. We're going to keep showing pictures, videos. We want to keep people up to date on what's happening, especially from people that are in the front line. And that is the best we can do. And let's bring that information out. So thanks for joining us today on a very, very special episode. And I can't wait to catch up with everybody.